Welcome to the Ohio AgNet podcast. I'm Matt Reese. I'm the editor for Ohio's Country Journal, joined by Joel Penhorwood with Ohio AgNet. And today we welcome Brad Moffitt. He's the ethanol specialist for Ohio Corn and Wheat. Thanks for being with us today, Brad.
Always a pleasure to be with you guys.
Now, we are talking about a fun topic today. Uh, we've talked a lot in corn circles and agricultural circles, of course, about ethanol for many years. But ethanol is a really popular topic in a group we don't necessarily talk to all the time. Folks really interested in high performance cars that have power and go fast. And this is not necessarily my wheelhouse, but Brad kind of dabbles in the wheelhouse a little bit with these fast cars and has some experience with that. Brad, what's your involvement with that? Obviously, you come from the ethanol agriculture side, but you kind of like the other side as well.
Well, I'm a muscle car guy and have been since probably junior high school. And I was always a fan of what we call Mopar muscle, and that basically meant Dodge and Plymouth muscle cars like the Challengers, the Chargers, the GTX, the Road Runners, the Super Bs. Always loved those cars. Owned one in the middle to late 70s. But when you're young, dumb, and looking for the next toy, you sell, you trade. I wished it was a Dodge Charger, but it had a 318 cubic inch engine, which wasn't big enough for me. But if I'd have been smart, I would have stored the car, and 20 years down the road, went to Jegs, bought a crate engine, and made a supercar. But I've dabbled in that, and now I'm the proud owner of a Dodge Challenger again, which is now running on 85% ethanol. And I've even got a Honda CRZ two-seater that is running on 85% ethanol now. So I do like my high-performance vehicles, but also encourage the use of ethanol blended fuel in your everyday drivers.
Mm-hmm. Right, and a lot of times those two groups overlap a little more than we maybe think about and talk about, and we're going to dig more into that, and maybe talk a little bit about some racing too, moving forward with Brad. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it. But first, we got to touch on some audio that we've got. We have some great information from Marlene Eick, who is talking about membership. Also, John Settlemyre with Ohio Corn and Wheat. Talking about the push for membership here and the value of getting involved with Ohio Corn and Wheat and some of the positive things that come along with that. And you get to hang out with folks like Brad, for one. In addition to that, we have Mark Goeke from Allen County talking about the value of feeding his cattle. Both he feeds corn, but also soy. And that soy is a really important protein source for cattle producers and livestock producers around the state. So Mark's talking a little bit about that in audio coming up. And we've got some others, Joel, right?
Absolutely. Our own Dale Menio chats with Dale Everman of Holman Incorporated, talking about all those things that you need to keep in mind with regard to after wheat harvest. We know, wheat harvest wrapped up here in the Buckeye State, and it was a really good one yield-wise from the guys that we've talked to. But all of a sudden then you have time to apply manure and otherwise, and also what to keep in mind as the year starts to, as the number of days left in the year starts to continue to knock down. Isn't that hard to believe? State fair is over, crop tour is complete, and all of a sudden, Farm Science Review will be here, and then there'll be a little less time on the calendar. It's amazing. So what do we do with that time left? That's what Dale and Dale talk about. And then also our own Dusty Sonnenberg chats with Jameson Ringer and Tom Berenga of Kenfeld Group and TTG Equipment, talking a little bit about their merger as True Land Equipment, and their effective merger date will be August 21st. So quite the thing for Northwest Ohio Equipment. And also, I'd like to, Brad, ask you a little bit about in this intro before we wrap things up here. What's the evolution been like for ethanol in the racing industry?
Well, I tell you, it's really hard to pinpoint, because when we talk about the racing industry, we're talking about virtually dozens of different classes of racing, and each class may use a different fuel because some of the top end vehicles are using products like methanol. NASCAR uses the 15% ethanol blend, which In the racing industry, we call E15, but in the consumer retail area, we call it unleaded 88. So consumers know that they're getting a higher octane product than regular. But ethanol has always been a go-to in the racing industry, because if you buy racing fuel, 85% ethanol racing fuel, it's 117 octane. And 117 octane and a high performance engine puts out horsepower and speed.
Yeah, and we're going to definitely want to dig more into that, because I find that that topic very fascinating. Also, Brad, I wanted to ask you, have you been hearing about some of these high wheat yields? Brad handles some of the wheat yield contests at the Ohio Corn and Wheat, and there's been some good ones out there.
Well, it's an exciting time. First thing I'll tell you is that Ohio led the nation in for the National Wheat Yield Contest. Ohio leads the nation in entries. So we had more entries than any other state in this year's wheat yield contest. And this is the first year where we've had growers who had to do rechecks. And what that means is if a grower hits 150 bushels per acre, that particular plot has to be rechecked with another judge. So I believe we're going to be looking at a record for Ohio's wheat yield contest, and it will be over 150 bushels per acre.
Wow.
But we had more acres. We had great wheat, even though the early July rains prevented harvest until, some guys were still harvesting the third week of July. We had great yields, and I understand we also had great quality. I was concerned about head sprout there in late July, but I've heard no reports of head sprout damage or high vomitoxin or damaged kernels, so I think we're good.
Well, and we'll be hearing more about that as results come out here this fall, right, Brad?
Yeah, right around, the end of November, we should start hearing results.
Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to it.
150 bushels per acre wheat. That's a plus.
Yeah, that's serious.
Good genetics, good weather, and good grower practices. I think it's a trifecta that all came together this year.
Well, excellent. We're going to be hearing much more from Brad about all things racing and ethanol coming up next in the podcast. Thanks all for tuning in to the Ohio AgNet podcast, and be sure to check out the rest available in Digital Dale and up at ocj.com, and the links in the comments on this post. Thanks for tuning in.